Have you ever stood at the edge of a breakthrough only to be tempted to call it the finish line? Have you ever felt like stopping, not because you reached the destination, but because you were just too tired of the journey? There are many who have bowed at the altar of temporary comfort, calling it rest when in truth it was distraction. You prayed and God answered a little. You pushed and a door opened slightly. And now the enemy whispers, that's enough, settle here. But deep within you, something still stirs. Something tells you, this is not the crown. This is not the prophecy fulfilled. This is just the beginning. Listen carefully. Don't settle too soon. God is not done with you. What if the version of success you are holding is only a seed, not the harvest? What if your current level is proof that higher realms exist? There is a voice calling men and women out of mediocrity. A trumpet from the Spirit is summoning dreamers, warriors, and visionaries to keep pressing. Because you were not born for halfway glory. You were not anointed to build tents in valleys. You were destined to climb the mountain. This is not your end. There is more. There is a mystery in the Spirit that many have not yet discerned. The danger of premature satisfaction. One of the greatest tragedies of destiny is to confuse a signpost for the destination. There are people who, because they touched a door, assumed they had entered the palace. They received a glimpse of breakthrough, a little applause, a small lifting, and in that moment, something in their spirit lost the hunger that kept them pressing. They settled. Satan knows he may not be able to stop you completely. So he distracts you with comfort. He decorates the wilderness and makes it look like Canaan. And many, having not discerned process, pitch their tents in lands that were only meant to be passed through. What was meant to be a transition becomes a conclusion. What was meant to be a phase becomes a finality. And they begin to celebrate what is not the crown just because it looked like a medal. There is a reason God told the children of Israel to move even when they were tired. He would disrupt their comfort with a cloud of movement. Because if you do not train yourself to discern movement in the Spirit, you will settle where you were supposed to be trained, and you will build altars around experiences that were only meant to be lessons. This is why hunger is a gift. The day you lose it, your spirit begins to deteriorate. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, not those who once hungered. You must keep hunger alive even in the presence of results. Men rise in the kingdom not just by revelation, but by discernment. You must discern when a season is closing and when another is beginning. Many people remain stuck in cycles, not because the heavens are closed, but because their discernment has been compromised by comfort. You see, there is something called the deception of early results. It looks like success, it smells like success, but it lacks the weight of the throne. It is not yet the fullness of what God spoke. But if you're not careful, your soul will begin to build systems around that shadow. It will begin to protect it, to defend it, and you will resist the very hand of God trying to move you forward. Have you not read that Abraham was told to look to the stars? That vision was not a suggestion, it was a rebuke against smallness. God was saying, Abraham, don't settle. I didn't call you to have a son. I called you to father nations. But if all you see is Isaac, you will miss Israel. Many people are sitting on the edge of greater dimensions, but they cannot step in because they are too full of lesser victories. When you clap too long at yesterday's success, you delay tomorrow's glory. Learn to thank God without settling. Learn to celebrate progress without concluding. Because the throne is still ahead and God is not done. There are moments in your life when the silence of God can become deafening. You've fasted, you've prayed, you've spoken the word, yet it seems as though heaven is quiet. You look around and others seem to be moving. Doors are opening for them. Testimonies are coming in like waves. And you wonder, Lord, have you forgotten me? But what you may not realize is that delay in the realm of God is not always denied. Sometimes what you call delay is a holy pause, a sacred season of divine processing. You see, God is not just interested in bringing you into a blessing. He is interested in making sure the blessing does not destroy you when it. Many are praying for a throne they do not have the stamina to occupy, and in His mercy He withholds it, not to punish you, but to prepare you. There are dimensions in God that require stature to carry, and stature is not imparted, it is built, it is forged in the fire of waiting. The wilderness is not a place of punishment, it is a place of preparation. It is where God breaks ambition, so that purity can be born. It is where He crushes pride, where He strips you of the applause of men, so you can be addicted to His voice alone. Many do not realize that the silence of God is a language. It is a teaching. It is a school where the noise of life is silenced, so that the whispers of eternity can be heard. When God is silent, He is speaking most loudly to your spirit. He is doing something deeper than your emotions can interpret. That's why many faint. They interpret delay as rejection, when in fact it is construction. You ask for promotion, but God begins to show you your weaknesses. You ask for increase, but God begins to prune you. You thought delay meant you were behind, but in the intelligence of the Spirit, you were being recalibrated to carry something greater. The problem is that impatience is a thief of destiny. It pushes men to create Ishmaels, because Isaac took too long. It makes people force doors that were never ordained, and what was meant to be a season of empowerment becomes a lifetime of wandering. Learn to embrace the delays of God. They are filled with wisdom. In that season your roots grow deep, your discernment sharpens, your appetite is restructured. God begins to cut off associations that were secretly sabotaging you. He begins to teach you the integrity of His word. He starts building in you a version of yourself that can stand in corridors of influence and not lose your soul. The delay is divine. And when the appointed time comes, what once seemed stagnant will explode with acceleration. What took others years will take you months, because your foundations are deeper. That is how God works. The waiting was never wasted. It was weaving something eternal, because even when you didn't see it, He was still working. In the realm of the Spirit, God never begins a thing publicly. Everything great that God does starts in the hidden place. There is a pattern, unchanging, unbroken, eternal. Before the manifestation, there is a season of incubation. Before lifting, there is shaping. Before you become a voice to nations, you must first survive anonymity. The problem is that many despise hidden seasons, because they assume visibility means validation. But in God's economy, it is the secret place that determines your rank. When God begins to build a man, He does not begin with applause. He begins with silence. He takes you away from the eyes of men. He hides you where your potential is not recognized, where your gifts are not celebrated, where your efforts are not rewarded. It is in that place that your motives are purified. It is there that God teaches you the difference between ambition and destiny. He teaches you that greatness is not a pursuit, it is a product of alignment. Hidden seasons are classrooms where the curriculum is the cross. God begins to strip away every identity you've borrowed from the world. He teaches you contentment without recognition. He trains your heart to echo. Even if no one claps, I will still burn. Because if you don't die to applause in the cave, you will become addicted to the approval of men on the throne. And once the validation of people becomes your oxygen, you will never be able to carry the weight of glory. The reason many abort their destinies
is because they tried to exit hiddenness too early. They promoted themselves when God was still processing. They wanted microphones when heaven was still forming their message. They wanted crowns when God was still crushing the flesh. But in the wisdom of God, He will hide you even from those who could help you, because premature exposure is dangerous. If you are exposed before you are forged, the pressure of public scrutiny will shatter you. Every authentic man God has ever used was first buried in silence, buried in obscurity, buried in rejection, buried in waiting, because burial is proof that resurrection is coming. The deeper the burial, the greater the resurrection. But the flesh resists this process. It says, let me be seen, let me be known. Yet heaven replies, let me be formed, let me be built. Even Jesus, the pattern man, was hidden for 30 years for a ministry of 3. And in those silent years, stature was growing, wisdom was increasing, capacity was being built. But to the undiscerning eye, it looked like nothing was happening. That's why you must never mock a man in his silent season. What you call delay may be God saying, I'm not done building yet. So when nothing around you seems to be moving, don't despair. God often hides those He wants to reveal. If He is taking time, it is because what He is building cannot collapse. The weight of your future requires the foundation of secrecy. Stay hidden until the voice calls you.
Many times what man calls settling is not because God has completed His work, but because fear has whispered a lie that they have reached the best they will ever see. Insecurity begins to speak louder than prophecy. Fear begins to redefine the boundaries of expectation. And so, a man who was called to see nations settles for a corner. A woman anointed to shake generations decides to remain hidden, not by divine strategy but by emotional defeat. Many destinies have been truncated, not by lack of prophecy, but by the voices of fear and the deception of safety. There is something about fear that is subtle. It does not always roar. Sometimes it speaks with logic. It will say, you've done enough. What if you fail, if you go further? It reminds you of statistics, of history, of your background. It begins to speak in the language of caution. And if your discernment is not sharp, you will confuse fear for wisdom. You will call cowardice contentment. You will interpret limitation as humility. Insecurity builds walls around your destiny and then convinces you that those walls are your protection. It tells you, don't dream too big because you might be disappointed. It says, don't step out, you're not qualified. Others tried and failed. And while the heavens are still echoing, there is more. Your heart begins to say, this is enough. And the moment that agreement is made, spiritual stagnation begins. The tragedy is not just that you stop moving forward. The tragedy is that you made peace with it. You built systems around your limitation. You began to create a theology to defend your fear. You quoted scriptures to excuse your inaction. And what began as a temporary pause became a permanent address. Fear does not just stop movement. It stops sight. It blinds you from seeing what is still possible. You stop dreaming. You stop expecting. You stop reaching. And when there is no expectation, there is no manifestation. Heaven responds to hunger. If the cry is gone, the supply is delayed. This is why Satan uses fear, not just to paralyze your body but to silence your desire. God never designed men to live from their history. He designed men to live from His promises. But when fear becomes your teacher, you will measure the future by what happened in your past. And you will forget that the God who speaks is also the God who performs. The God who called you did not call you based on your ability. He called you based on His intention. So when you settle too soon, you insult His intelligence. You say, God, you miscalculated. You must war against fear with revelation. You must tear down every mental ceiling built by failure, rejection, or trauma. The greatness you sense is not ambition.
It is prophecy. And if God planted that vision, it is proof that there is provision. Do not let fear rewrite your destiny. Do not let insecurity define your ceiling. There is more. In this kingdom, every dimension of destiny has its reward. But not every reward is the crown. There are blessings that come as encouragements, not conclusions. There are victories that are tokens of process, not signs of arrival. And if you lack discernment, you will stop where you should have simply passed through. You will build tabernacles around moments that were only meant to be monuments of transition. It is possible to win a battle and yet lose the war, simply because you misunderstood the purpose of the battle. Many have received a measure of lifting and assumed it was the fullness of the throne. They tasted favor and decided to pitch their tent. They touched the door and assumed it was the palace. But destiny does not end at open doors. It continues into rooms, and from rooms into thrones. And only those who understand process continue walking, even while others are dancing around temporary victories. Temporary victories are not evil, but they are dangerous when they become places of comfort. They feed your pride, they silence your hunger, and they slowly begin to teach your heart to settle for less. There is a deception that comes with partial success. It makes you believe you have seen the best of God. It makes you begin to define your identity by past achievement. You begin to wear yesterday's glory as today's robe, not knowing that the cloud has moved. The children of Israel were instructed not to gather manna beyond the day, except for the Sabbath. Why? Because fresh instructions and fresh supplies are tied to divine movement. But when men settle at the place of yesterday's encounter, they become custodians of history instead of pioneers of prophecy. Do you not know that there are higher realms, even in the same calling, that the same God who gave you 10 can multiply it to 100, that the healing anointing you walk in is just the beginning of deeper graces, locked in your alignment. But when you become too satisfied with lesser victories, you lose the pursuit that opens greater doors. The anointing follows hunger. Glory follows hunger. Dimensions are birthed in restlessness. A man can be applauded on earth and yet be weeping in the spirit. Heaven may be saying, why did you stop here? Who told you this was your throne? The applause of men must never be mistaken for the validation of completion. Men clap when they see what they understand, but the blueprint of your life is not in their hands. It is with God. Only He can tell you when it is time to rest. So don't be deceived by early fruit. Celebrate it. Yes, but don't camp there. Build altars of thanksgiving, not houses of conclusion. Because in this kingdom the journey is from faith to faith, from glory to glory. And what looks like a crown now may only be a seed in the eyes of God. Stay pressing, stay discerning. There is more. In the economy of the Spirit, silence does not mean absence. The silence of God is one of the most misunderstood languages in the journey of destiny. Many cry in their hearts, Lord, where are you? Because they no longer hear the instructions that once came clearly, the dreams that once flowed with ease, the confirmations that once reassured their path. But the silence of God is not a sign that He has abandoned you. It is a sign that something deeper is being constructed. God does not go silent when nothing is happening. He goes silent when something eternal is taking shape. When God is building a man, He speaks. But when He starts trusting what He has built in the man, He tests. There is a point in your walk with God where He stops holding your hand like a child. Not because you are forsaken, but because you are now expected to walk by what you've already received. The silence of God is proof that maturity is being sought. It is an invitation to ascend in faith, to trust His nature beyond His voice, to believe in His promises even when no wind or fire confirms it. This is where many lose the war of destiny, because when God goes quiet, the enemy gets louder. When heaven seems still, hell seems busy. Satan speaks through circumstances, through fear, through delays, through the opinions of people, and if you are not anchored in what God has said, you will be shaken by what He is not saying. But the wise know God's silence is never empty. It is filled with intention. It is laced with strategy. When the architect stops talking, It's because the design is complete and construction has begun. There are times when the voice of God pauses so that the hand of God can move. You may not hear him, but he is aligning kings, shifting systems, preparing platforms, arranging relationships. He is going ahead of you to create a stage your voice can stand on. And if you are not trained in discernment, you will confuse his silence for distance. You will think nothing is happening, when in fact, everything is happening behind the deeper you go with God, the less frequently he speaks. Not because he loves you less, but because he has invested more in you. Infants cry and get attention. Soldiers trust and receive victory. The more God can trust you with his silence, the more he can trust you with his glory. This is where patience becomes prophetic. This is where waiting becomes worship. This is where stillness becomes strength. Because you know even when the storm rages and no voice calms it, he is still in the boat. Do not be deceived by the quietness of heaven. Do not judge your progress by how loud the visions are. Often when God is most silent, he is most present. When he hides, it's because he's working. And when he finishes, he will reveal what was forming in the dark. Beloved, do not settle too soon. The process you are enduring is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It is proof that he is still working. That delay is not denial. That silence is not absence. That small victory is not the final reward. God is building something eternal, something weighty, something that eyes have not seen and ears have not heard. Refuse to camp where you should be passing through. Refuse to let fear define your limits. Refuse to let insecurity rewrite your identity. There is more. There is always more in God. The version of you that will emerge after this process will command honor, carry weight, and embody glory. Do not let your hunger die at the gates of partial progress. Press on, for God is not done with you yet. May your heart be strengthened as you walk through the seasons of silence, delay and molding. May you never confuse transition for conclusion. May you have the grace to discern movement, the courage to keep pressing, and the wisdom to wait when God is working behind the. Good luck on your journey into destiny. Thank you for walking with faith, for listening with a hungry heart, and for staying until the end. Keep rising, because God is still writing your story.